behalf of our board, our members, and my colleagues, thank you for joining us for the 2023 State of the City of St. Catharines address here at Club Roma, presented in partnership with Verge Insurance, and for the first time with Mayor Matt Cisco. We have over 350 people in attendance. We thank you for being with us, and please know that we never take it for granted. My name is Mishka Balsam, and I'm the CEO of the GNCC. Let us start out by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee people. We recognize and deeply appreciate their historic connection to this place. We also recognize the contributions of Métis, Inuit, and Indigenous people, both in shaping and strengthening this region in particular, and our province and country as a whole. We offer our sincere gratitude and respect to the original and continued stewards of this land. It is my honor to acknowledge our elected officials who are with us today. Chris Biddle, MP, Regional Chair Jim Bradley, Jim Diodati, Mayor of Niagara Falls, Sandra Easton, Mayor of the town of Lincoln, and Regional Councillor Joyce Morocco. And from the St. Catharines City Council, we have Don Dodge, Carlos Garcia, Matt Harris, Robin McPherson, Caleb Ratzliff, and Mark Stevens. And from the Welland City Council, we have Adam Mood, and we're really pleased to say that Mayor Matt Cisco has also decided to be with us. We thank all of you and your colleagues for your unwavering commitment. But I'm equally as proud to be here today, along with so many organizations committed to St. Catharines, Niagara, and our province, to ensure that not only prosperity exists, but also well-being and sustainability. These organizations and individuals are important during ordinary time, and we have found them to be indispensable during tough ones. We often point out the differences of the public and private sectors. We likely, as a chamber, want to be blamed for that too. But I think that there is also areas that we have in common. As elected officials have put their name on the ballot, business owners, managers, operators, staff who have joined us today had equal courage to put everything on the line, to hang up a sign in the window that says, "We're open." Theodore Roosevelt gave a speech in the early 1900s, and I have always liked this passage. It is not the critic who counts. It is not the person who points out that the strong person stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done better. The credit belongs to the people and to the person who's actually in the arena, who at the best in the end knows the triumph of high achievement, and who at worst, if they fail daring greatly. I applaud everyone's courage here for being part and being in the arena. Just to give you an overview of the format today and what you can expect, we are going to start out with the keynote by Mayor Matt Cisco. Then you will get the complete lunch, and it's followed by a fireside chat. We have asked you to provide us with topics and questions that are relevant to you, and we've received many of them, and please know that we're committed to addressing them. If you haven't had a chance to do so, please find me, and I will ensure and make sure that we can get to all of the questions. But before we move on, let me acknowledge our partners who have made today possible. Verge Insurance Group, M&P, Electra, Bell, McGar Realty, Heddle Shipyards, YourTV, Soundbox Productions, Quitelli, Move 105.7, and Newstalk 610 CKDB. Thank you so very much. I would also like to acknowledge GNCC board members who are with us today. We have the chair of our board, Noel Buckley, with Niagara Falls Scotiabank Convention Center and Cold Break Brewery. Alexis Kleiman, our next Niagara chair. Stephen Orton, vice chair of GNCC with Meridian Credit Union. Dr. Barry Wright with Goodman School, and Bruce Peaver with KPMG. Thank you so very much for all that you do too. And I would like to extend a very special thanks to Virgin Insurance Group for being the title sponsor of the State of the City event. Virgin Insurance is a full-service insurance brokerage specializing in personal, commercial, life, and employee benefits insurance. Virgin Insurance Group is passionate about building Niagara and giving back to the local community. They have shown this through their continued commitment with their work with local charities throughout the years. And introducing Mayor Cisco will be Carolyn Shirk, Chief Operating Officer of the Virgin Insurance Group. Carolyn has been part of Virgin Group for over 10 years, working alongside her family to deliver insurance across the region. And if I could ask Carolyn to come forward, thank you. Please welcome.
Good afternoon. We are here today to hear our mayor, Matt Cisco, deliver his first ever State of the City address. As a business community, this is an annual tradition for us to come together and see the vision for our city over the next year. Matt has represented the community by serving on the St. Catharines City Council St. Patrick's Ward from 2010 until January of this year. He was then appointed to Regional Council to fill the seat left by the passing of Sandy Bellows. Matt has also been a high school physics teacher for 15 years. Mayor Cisco's own children and his students have inspired his political career. His goal is to build a community where the youth of today can live, work, and raise families of their own. Matt ran his campaign on the 3 A's: making life in St. Catharines more affordable, making our community more accessible, and making all 3 levels of government more accountable. The mayor has had the opportunity to work closely with city staff and has the deepest respect for the work that gets done at City Hall and around the city every day. He's excited about the new role, getting to work alongside all staff at the city as they continue to build a community that we can all be proud to call home. It is now my pleasure to introduce Matt Cisco.
Good afternoon. Let me begin by thanking everyone here at the Greater Niagara Chamber of Commerce for the opportunity I have today. To Mishka, to Hugo, to Karina, and to all others who were involved, my sincere thanks. I'd also like to thank Carolyn Shirk for a wonderful introduction, and thank you to the title sponsor, Virgin Insurance, for their support in helping me bring my words to you today. If we're being honest, I would probably get in trouble if I didn't mention some of the elected guests and City Hall folks who are here today, so let me very quickly thank CAO David Oakes, Deputy CAO Aaron Ohosky, and directors Christine Douglas, Shandor Chanyi, I practiced that and I still screwed it up, Anthony Martuccio, Phil Christie, Brian York, and Jeanette Pelletieri. I also would like to thank my council colleagues, Councillors Dodge, Garcia, McPherson, Ratzlaff, Stevens. I heard Councillor Harris is here as well, and also Deputy Mayor Phillips for being here. There were 2 regrets, unfortunately. I know MP Biddle and MPP Stevens wanted to be here today but weren't able to, but they sent me very kind messages, and I appreciate the working relationship I have with both of them. We all have the same goals in mind, and I always appreciate their support. As Mayor of St. Catharines, it's my duty and my honor today to report on the state of our city. After only 4 short months, we've already begun to put in place the policies and plans we need to get to the bright future we all desire in our community. There was a slideshow. Good, it's coming up. I just wanted to make sure. The teacher in me always worries about that. The next 4 years promise to be an exciting time in the city of St. Catharines. I should say, this is a strange time in which to write a speech when there are a lot of assistive tools online. I'll admit to a certain amount of curiosity as to what would happen if I went over to an artificial intelligence chatbot like ChatGPT and I just plugged in State of the City speech St. Catharines. So I tried it, and I was a little bit surprised. It told me I needed a Britney Spears microphone. I needed a pair of work boots to put here. Apparently a lunchbox was required. There was something about a banner I was supposed to have everybody sign. I wasn't entirely sure. It also said roll up my sleeves. It's not really my thing, but I decided it was a bit much. I was going to try and be traditional. And truthfully, when I did plug in State of the City, St. Catharines, into ChatGPT, the response was actually very straightforward. ChatGPT's first thought was this: St. Catharines is known for its thriving arts and culture scene with a number of galleries, theaters, and festivals throughout the year. It also has a significant historical and industrial heritage, with the Welland Canal passing through the city and a number of factories and manufacturing plants in the area. And the truth is, our arts and culture scene has been a vibrant driver of our local economy for several years. Since the 2006 to 10 term of council, the city has had in place the Downtown Creative Cluster Master Plan, a blueprint for a true rejuvenation of downtown St. Catharines. Well, everyone knows about the big pieces that this plan delivered, like the building of the first Ontario Performing Arts Centre and the Meridian Centre. A lot of the small changes and the additional supports to our creative sector led to what is a true renaissance in our downtown. For starters, the festivals. If you want to see evidence of St. Catharines' entrepreneurial spirit, its desire to get back outside, back to business, back to arts and culture, look no further than the myriad of festivals that our city hosted this past year. While no one wants to remember COVID, the reality of the pandemic can't be lost when we look at where we came from. Re-emerging after global shutdowns and getting moving again took a lot of effort on everyone's part. So where did St. Catharines land? Well, almost 140,000 visitors last year. That's another St. Catharines on top of St. Catharines. So what did that look like? The Niagara Folk Arts Festival, the longest-running folk arts festival in Canada, continues to rebound strongly from the pandemic and is looking to expand even further this year as it welcomes members of the community into the different cultural homes that make up St. Catharines and Niagara. The Cicada Music and Arts Festival, one of my personal favorites, now in its fourth year brings together both local talent as well as some of Canada's finest musicians and bands to Henley Island for an amazing experience. The Emancipation Day weekend of events in August, developed by local Black entrepreneurs at Black-owned 905 and Matter of Black Niagara, reminding us of what our history is and what our future can be if we listen to and support those in our community who we haven't historically included. The Born and Raised concert series, transforming Montebello Park over the Canada Day long weekend into a music hub on display for the entire nation to see. The Celebration of Nations weekend in downtown, which has become an annual gathering of Indigenous arts, culture, and tradition in our community, showcasing the history that has shaped these lands for generations. It was also a further chance to demonstrate our commitment to the path of truth and reconciliation that we as a community continue to walk down with our Indigenous partners. And the Niagara Grape and Wine Festival. How can you ever forget the Wine Festival, Canada's largest wine and culinary celebration, bringing joy to the streets through parade floats and festivities for more than 70 years. But let's not forget that some of those 130,000 visitors to our community will also have the choice to stay, thanks to the downtown renaissance and the recent residential building boom, brought about by further changes and a continued commitment to the master plan. 57 Carlisle Street, led by Nick Adelick and Nickel Developments, continues to rise at the corner of St. Paul and Carlisle. I am sure we can all agree that the return of cranes to our downtown skyline is a welcome sight, and increased foot traffic is something many businesses are clamoring to see. 88 James Street, the other stunning rendering on the screen behind me, has seen positive pre-sale interest, and the development team has been working in concert with city staff to move plans through the system. This project has opened my eyes to the modernization and the changes our planning staff have made to make projects easier to get through City Hall, and is a testament to the well-conceived and planned-out concept plan that will be turned into residential reality in the near term. At the corner of McGuire and St. Paul, site of the infamous rock pile, Council made an important decision last fall to incentivize the cleanup and redevelopment of a site that was first conceived of more than 30 years ago. And while only a very small minority complain about our community improvement plan, and it did become a big issue in the recent election when several third-party campaigns tried to impugn those of us who believe strongly in CIP's capacity to do good in our community, it needs to be pointed out that every single councillor who was targeted in the anti-CIP third-party campaign was elected or re-elected, not by small margins. We are in an old city built on the very foundation of the Industrial Revolution, and the community very well understands the needed support in cleaning up old environmental brownfields and directing development towards more affordable housing options. But just in case anyone in this room wasn't completely convinced, let me give you one key statistic. The Community Improvement Program, at present, is saving the average resident $27 a year on their property taxes. While it's true that the program is designed to incentivize investment and development in target areas throughout our community, those incentives amount to approximately $21 per year for the average taxpayer. But the part that the opponents of this program refuse to acknowledge, those developments that we have attracted to our city with the help of CIP have generated substantial new investment and increased the assessment tax base to the benefit of the entire community. The assessment generated from those investments is actually reducing property taxes by $48 per year for the average taxpayer. So if you're keeping score at home, the CIP program is delivering a 228% return on investment. Now, I know that I'm just a physics teacher. My roots are in engineering and physics. There are many of you in the audience who understand business and finance better than I do. But as your mayor, I am pretty pleased with that kind of a return on investment and would love to find more programs that deliver so robustly. That new assessment includes former brownfields, like the old Domtar property in Meriton, that are now viable lands providing an economic good to the community. In the future, it'll include the former GM property at 282-285 Ontario Street, which after rezoning could include a broad mix of uses that wouldn't be possible without the CIP funds, along with a myriad of other efforts at the city and the region to incentivize brownfield developments. And all of these developments, incentivized or not, can't come fast enough. We've seen a shifting landscape under our feet as the provincial government makes big changes across the municipal sector. Whether it was Bill 109, the More Homes for Everyone Act, Bill 3, the Strong Mayors Building Homes Act, the Bill 23, More Homes Built Faster Act, or Bill 39, the Better Municipal Governance Act, the province has not been shy about what their top priority is for Ontario. It's housing. And I don't disagree with their priority. While there are aspects of all this legislation that I have issues with, the ultimate goal is one which I believe many of us recognize as being the biggest issue in our community right now. There isn't enough housing, and because of that, housing is expensive and unaffordable for many in St. Catharines and throughout Niagara. I have 4 kids at home. If things don't improve, they will all struggle to find housing in their hometown. As your mayor and their father, I can't allow that to happen. It was with that in mind that Council passed the most important piece of our term so far, and what might stand as the most important piece of our entire term, the City of St. Catharines Housing Pledge. We were called on by the province to develop a coherent plan that would make it possible for developers to build 11,000 housing units in the next 10 years in our community. The plan we laid out builds on a lot of the great work staff have done previously, but it also demonstrates a strong willingness to change and adapt to do our part in getting those housing units built. Now, I will interject here for just a moment to simply point out that my plan, the one I ran on, was more aggressive than the provincial guidelines. I believe we have the capacity to approve 15,000 units in the next 10 years that aren't currently in the ground if we focus on medium and high density developments and target them in underutilized parts of the city. We need to start discussing with our large property owners in St. Catharines how we can get housing built in these areas. But back to the plan. This is how we're going to get housing built. With a more permissive zoning bylaw than most of our comparable municipalities, coupled with a housing action plan, a variety of incentives that make it easier to develop, we will get those units approved, and we will put developers in the position they need to be in order to get those cranes in the air and those shovels in the ground. That's not to mention the process improvements brought about by the support from the provincial government through the Streamlined Development Fund. In conjunction with the development community, and under the leadership of our director, Tammy Kate, we're modernizing the processes at City Hall in the Planning and Building Services Department. We're creating and implementing technology solutions to long-standing problems and getting permits and plans approved faster. and we're finally hiring the people we need in that department to make those developments possible. If you want more evidence that these changes are working, we can see it in the plans we're seeing come forward from the development community. Atria Developments is ready to move forward with a massive residential development on YMCA Drive. The owners of the old General Hospital on Queenston Street are at the public open house stage with a 1,200 unit development, largely purpose-built rental. All of this is needed. All of this will help to improve the housing market, and the ultimate outcome will be that our kids will be able to keep their talents here at home as we build St. Catharines for this generation and the next. So I will just digress for a moment and say, there's a perfect example of why you can't trust a chat bot to try and write a speech. There's no way you go from vibrant arts culture to Bill 23 includes some legislative tools that may make it easier for my kids to afford a home in their hometown. That takes human ingenuity, and that's why the chatbots will never win. But I digress. The next comment that ChatGPT did give me. In terms of infrastructure, St. Catharines has a well-developed transportation system, including a regional airport, a bus transit system, and several major highways. The city also has a number of parks and green spaces, as well as a variety of recreational and sports facilities. We've made big strides with our recreation infrastructure. When I think back to when I first became a councillor, I don't know if there was a coherent plan in place on how to deal with our aging recreational facilities. We made a very big decision in my first year on council. We voted to build the Meridian Center. But that decision was made without a real idea of where we were, what we had, and what we needed to serve the needs of the community. It was that lack of a plan that spurred the creation of the Recreational Facilities and Programming Master Plan. A document that, just like the Creative Cluster Master Plan, didn't just sit on a shelf gathering dust, it was put into action. 10 years later, the rec facility landscape in St. Catharines looks very different. The recent completion of Canada Games Park completes a major overhaul of facilities across St. Catharines and demonstrates an important concept that many in the community have been calling for, but that has been difficult to realize. We finally worked together in Niagara to meet our current needs. Let's face it, we talk a lot about shared services. The facility at Brock is an actual, tangible example of multiple levels of government and governmental organizations working together to build more together than they could have individually. Even more than the First Ontario PAC downtown, which accommodates Brock University as part of its operating structure, Canada Summer Games Park is a partnership between St. Catharines, Thorold, and Brock University, with Niagara Region as a part of the group for capital purposes, that allows all three partners to benefit from a better, more robust facility at a fraction of the cost than if they had gone it alone. It's a model for the cooperation that needs to exist across all spheres in Niagara, not just on running buildings, but in all areas that municipalities touch. Niagara Regional Transit is another success story in this respect, and NRT might be the model that we need to use going forward to continue the cooperation and collaboration between municipalities. Speaking as the chair of the Linking Niagara Transit Committee that recommended the amalgamation of transit, and now as the chair of the new Transit Commission, the simple truth is that amalgamation wasn't an easy task to achieve, but it was the right choice. For all the parochialism that many complain exists in Niagara, an integrated system was chosen by an overwhelming majority of councils and councillors as the best way forward for the region. Let's call a spade a spade. Anytime you have the Niagara Poverty Reduction Network and the Greater Niagara Chamber of Commerce arguing on the same side of an issue, it's probably a winner. But the truth is, getting to a yes on integrated intermunicipal transit didn't just happen because of those who were arguing in favor of it. It happened because the process made sense to the municipalities that didn't have transit services to begin with, and it gave them a voice they were lacking. In fact, the governance model didn't only give them a voice, it specifically lessened the voice that St. Catharines, Welland, and Niagara Falls had on the commission. We could have argued that our population dictated a greater say on the commission, but instead we adopted a different stance. Influence isn't just about the number of votes you have. Influence can come from lessened numbers if the voices making the case make sense. By stating the idea of who has the power was less important than building a system that works, we were able to get integrated transit across the finish line, something that we should all be proud of. That's the model we need to adopt. We have to stop thinking that simply by numerical superiority we should exert our will. Let's make a better case rather than simply demand that we be listened to. We know that the Ontario government is looking at streamlining regional government in some capacity. The long list of legislation I mentioned earlier includes provisions to facilitate a discussion about governance and services here in Niagara. Let's use that opportunity to build a better idea of what Niagara can look like and then persuade others that that vision is the one that can benefit all of us. Let's look across municipal boundaries for ideas that work, and let's ignore the lines on the map to make them work for more of us. As for transit specifically, the amalgamation was only the first step. There's more that needs to be done on the service side. We need more frequency, we need expanded hours, and we need to keep moving the service in a direction that meets the needs of our changing community. One of my stated goals is to get high school students on the bus for free and develop the next generation of transit riders. We know programs like this work, and more riders today means more riders tomorrow, a benefit both environmentally and financially. And the plan doesn't end with high school students. We need to ensure that our system also works and is affordable for our older adults and aging population, marginalized populations, and those experiencing poverty in our community. Let's be honest, we need to do more to support people in St. Catharines and Niagara. We have an increasing population of people who are being forced into conditions that no one would choose. And as the cost of living rises, not just in our community, not just in Southern Ontario, but across North America, we need to build out better supports in our region that support the most vulnerable among us. To do this, we must hold upper levels of government accountable. Everyone in this room has heard the frustrations. The province underfunds Niagara when it comes to homelessness. We need more to combat drug addiction and develop programs to get people off drugs. Mental health supports are lacking and waiting lists are too long. At a certain point, though, we have to make a decision to deal with these issues. And sometimes that means we might have to make the hard decision and do it on our own. But we need to stop studying. We need to stop discussing. Collectively, we have to pick a path to follow. Senior levels of government need to make the tough decision to spend funds, and we all need to start building lasting solutions that will deal with these problems that plague our community. I've already started working to find some solutions within our municipal and regional influence, and I'm pleased that some of my colleagues at the region have as well. I know that our council here in St. Catharines is also on board, putting the city-owned property at 320 Geneva Street back on the market for the provision of affordable housing. In addition, we'll continue to push the region, along with the province and the federal government, to spend more to tackle the social issues that exist in our community and across Niagara. Ultimately, though, the time for talk has to be over as the social pressures continue to mount. The drug epidemic will not stop. In fact, it'll probably get worse if we continue on this path. Without changes in funding, housing will remain unaffordable. Mental health issues will not spontaneously resolve. It's up to all of us to hold all levels of government responsible to account for the decisions they make or fail to make. Because the reality is, these issues affect significantly more people than those who are directly impacted. Those issues impact every member of our community. Residents feel uncomfortable walking in our parks and are forced to deal with the trickle-down effects of these issues in their neighborhoods. Business owners in our downtown, people who've had to deal with 3 years of pandemic, rising costs, rampant inflation, are also contending with issues outside their front doors that are making it hard to attract and keep customers. Declaring a state of emergency isn't enough if all that means is more talk. The time for talk is over. We need concrete, actionable steps, and we need them now. I know our city council is ready to take these steps and lead, but we can't do it alone. I will do everything in my power to ensure regional council supports developing and implementing a plan of action, and I hope they will join me in calling for the necessary funds to deliver real results for our community. So one last time to ChatGPT. Overall, St. Catharines is a diverse and dynamic city that offers a range of cultural, economic, and recreational opportunities for its residents and visitors alike. This is the one that hits home for me. The last several years and the next several years serve to demonstrate just how true this statement will be. Last summer's Canada Summer Games were an unprecedented success. If you don't believe me, just ask Doug Hamilton yourself. He'll be happy to tell you all about it. We demonstrated to the entire country that we know how to host a national sporting event and that we have the world-class facilities to do so successfully. We ensured that the event incorporated not just sport, but all aspects of culture, inclusivity, and diversity into the delivery of the games, and built linkages with our local Indigenous community to make sure the games encompassed all aspects of our community. And that's a good thing, because sports and culture tourism can be a big driver in our economy, much bigger than they've been in the past, because we finally made the tough decision to invest in the facilities and listen to the voices of our partner organizations. Our friends down the QEW in Niagara Falls have the market cornered when it comes to traditional tourism. They'll tell you all about it as well. Just ask Diamond Jim Diodati. In between CNN interviews where he's explaining to Americans what Canada is, he'll tell you all about the plans to expand the tourism industry in the Falls. But sports tourism is a market that St. Catharines and Niagara can continue to expand as well with the creation of Sport Niagara, the legacy project of the Games, and now we have the instrument we need to make this a reality. Sport Niagara will be integral in helping the Canadian Henley Rowing Corporation welcome the world next year at the 2024 World Rowing Championships. They've been engaged with the Niagara Ice Dogs and new owner Darren DeDobler in building out an impressive bid to host the 2024 Memorial Cup. And along the way, the City of St. Catharines has been there at the ready with funding and support from city staff in economic development and tourism, as well as community, recreation, and cultural services led by Phil Christie. And I can assure you, our team will continue to be at the table as we move forward, supporting Sport Niagara in the quest to make our community a top choice for hosting sport events for many years to come. And before I get to talking about ECDEV, I've had some great conversations with Darren DeDobler, and I'm excited for the future of the team here in St. Catharines. Darren and his wife, Michelle, have fallen in love with Niagara, have fallen in love with the fans and the community, and their commitment to the city and the region has been awesome to see. I may be a bit biased as a 13-year season ticket holder, but I'm excited to see the team improve, and I'm over the moon at the prospect of hosting the rest of Canada once again, this time for the Memorial Cup. Now, this is my chance to shout out ECDEV, a group that I'm sure many in this room are familiar with and have had the chance to work with at some point, under the excellent leadership of Brian York. The work done by the city's Economic Development Department is second to none, and I appreciate all they do to work with our business community and identify ways the city can make it easier for local businesses to start up and to grow right here at home. Brian and his team are pros, and I have complete faith in their ability to continue to grow our city's economic base. I look forward to continuing visiting businesses across our city in the coming months. I'd be remiss if I didn't take the time to shout out the rest of our senior leadership team at the city. David Oakes and Aaron Ohosky, our CIO and Deputy CEO, have provided and continue to provide exceptional leadership. I won't go through everybody on the senior leadership team. I could add adjectives to all of them, but I will simply say that we are blessed to have a very talented team running the City of St. Catharines, and that exceptional talent pool runs throughout the corporation. My office is no exception whatsoever. Julie Hughes, Alicia Angrilli, and Brianne Whitty are the best team I could have dreamed of. So that was a slight detour, but one of the areas I've been immersing myself in since I took over in November of last year is the marine economy here in our city. I want to make sure it's clicking forward. Did it? Good. Wonderful. St. Catharines has been involved with our Niagara neighbors, as well as our marine sector businesses, in pushing the province to build out and implement a marine strategy that develops and builds off the foundation we have right here in Ontario. Here in St. Catharines, the importance of the marine industry is obvious. Algoma Central Marine is headquartered across the street from City Hall. Heddle Marine has reinvigorated the dry docks in Port Weller and has big plans for expanded activity in the future. And Neptunus Yachts International, also based in Port Weller, is still the best in the country, if not in the world, at what they do, building luxury yachts. There are so many small, medium, and large marine industry companies located in and around St. Catharines. We can't continue to allow other provinces and countries to move faster than us, to build their marine industries, without our own coherent, focused strategy on how to move forward in the marine industry. We need increased access to training for marine jobs. We need to make it less expensive for companies to choose to build, repair, and retrofit vessels here in Ontario. We need to ensure that the investments that our shipping industry is making, like the massive sustainability initiative undertaken by Algoma Central to ensure they have the greenest fleet on the Great Lakes, we need to make sure that that isn't wasted or taken for granted. So we'll ensure that our seat at the table is one that is vocal and pushes hard to have a strategy put in place in the short term so our marine industry can continue to grow in the long term. As the largest city in the Niagara region with nearly a third of its population, St. Catharines punches above its weight. It's not just our location between Toronto and Buffalo that sets us apart, it's also the employers who call the Garden City home. And our municipal roots in automotive manufacturing have long been a cornerstone of our community's economic vitality, dating back to the turn of the century with McKinnon Industries Limited, now General Motors Canada. 2 weeks ago, GM Canada made another historic announcement regarding the company's commitment to electrification, sharing plans to manufacture electric vehicle drive units at the propulsion plant right here in St. Catharines. This investment plan is expected to support 500 jobs at the Glendale Avenue facility and enable the production of more than 400,000 EV drive units a year. Investments like this are driving our economy forward. The city has a long and proud history in the manufacturing sector, and that history will continue into the middle part of the 21st century if we continue to make it easier for the industrial sector to invest and reinvest here in Niagara. At the region, that was part of my push to ensure that our industrial development charge grants remained as a major part of our incentive plans going forward. There's more we can do, and we will continue to push city and regional staffs to find new levers to pull to make it easier to do business here in St. Catharines and Niagara. So no pressure to my economic development friends. On the cultural side of things, there is still more that needs to be done. We've started to build bridges in our community and have found new and exciting ways to support cultural organizations, whether it's the Memorandum of Understanding with the Niagara Regional Native Center, or the exhibits at the city's Lock 3 Museum explaining Black history in St. Catharines and the challenges that still exist around racism and oppression. Over the coming months, we will continue to expand on these partnerships and agreements as we continue to collaborate with local groups in our efforts to build a more inclusive and accessible community. All of this and so much more to come in the next 4 years. When you're trying to decide whether to run in an election, I've always thought that the first question that you should be prepared for, and the question you should have the best answer for, is why. Why do you want to run? Why do you think you're the best person for the job? Why should voters give you this opportunity? I can tell you that my motivation has been the same since my very first election. I want this community to be a place of opportunity for those who are growing up today and will grow up here tomorrow and on for all future generations. I've always strongly believed in the concept of equality of opportunity. But for those upcoming and future generations, if we want St. Catharines to be a place of opportunity, we need to make changes now to ensure that this can be a place where they can grow their families. We need to do everything we can to ensure this is an affordable place to call home. We need to promote the ideas that will make all aspects of life in our community accessible to all. And we must ensure that the four, yes, still 4 levels of government in St. Catharines are held accountable and work properly together to ensure that equality of opportunity is ensured for all the people who call this city home. I'm committed to that vision. I know everyone else in this room is committed to that ideal. And I look forward to building an equality of opportunity for all those who call St. Catharines home over the next 4 years. Thank you. Now, let's be honest, Councillor Stevens guilted you all into standing up for that. Before I leave the stage, I would be remiss. I promised my wife I would not say a single word about her during this speech, but she didn't boo me, and this is the first public event, including my inauguration, that she didn't boo me when I got up on stage. So I will simply thank my beautiful wife, Chrissy Sadowski, for being the best partner I could ever ask for. And Dia Daddy, the social media hawk, had to come up and take a picture. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so very much. We are going to follow with lunch, and then right after lunch, in about 30 minutes from now, we are going to conduct the fireside chat for all the follow-up questions that you have provided us. Enjoy lunch. You brought up the classroom. Let me start out with that.
Okay.
If I would ask you, what's the difference? Where do you find an easier audience, high school students or in a room like this?
There's no answer I can give right now that someone's not going to take offense to. I will say I loved being a high school teacher. I have 15 years in a physics classroom. I will only say this because my wife was in the audience. I had a couple of people, same level of engagement here during that speech as high school students learning physics. But I'm looking specifically at my wife when I say that. She wasn't listening to any of the words. She was just watching to make sure that my fly was done up. But no, I do enjoy coming into rooms like this. I think it's events like this are important, right? And especially when a new mayor comes in. I've had the benefit of watching a couple of them, and it's important to get a sense of where that new mayor, the new council want to take things. So I just appreciate the number of people that are here today. I really appreciate that everybody's here.
Thank you very much. 4 months into the role of Mayor of St. Catharines, during that same period of time, the Ontario government had announced that they're conducting a governance review. They refer to it as Bill 39, which means by the time maybe our next municipal election comes around, we might not be voting for the same boundaries as we have them. We have 12 municipalities, we have one regional government. We might see some changes when it comes to that. There's a lot of talk in the community that speaks to one Niagara, 4 cities of Niagara, a single-tier system. What are your thoughts when it comes to this topic? I thought I'd start with an easy question.
Yeah, no difficult questions to begin, eh? So I'll start by saying this, and some in the room may have heard me describe this before. I read Paul Wells. He was with Maclean's, he was with the National Post. Very smart guy, covers a lot of Canadian politics. Paul Wells has some rules about Canadian politics, and I believe the first rule, Wells's first rule of Canadian politics, is the most boring outcome is the most likely outcome. And anybody who went through the conversation we had 4 years ago probably knows that the outcome there was the most boring of all outcomes, status quo. I fear that this process will come and it will go when we will wind up in a similar situation. And that's not to say that I think there's one better system, that we have to be one tier, or we should go to 4 cities. It's not to say any of that. It's to say we have an opportunity right now to make fundamental changes. And I talked a little bit about it in my speech. We know that there are things that we're not doing effectively because we're disjointed. We know that because of the lines that are drawn on a map, there are real difficulties in trying to find efficiency, find ways to do things differently that's going to either deliver better service or less costly service. So whatever we go through in this process, I hope we get to a place where government as a whole in Niagara and St. Catharines is streamlined and we're working better together. I'm focused, and I'll be completely honest, I'm focused on the idea of pushing shared services across boundaries because I can't predict where Bill 39 and everything else, thank you, Mayor Easton. I can't predict where we're going on this. I will say, and I'm just gonna take this opportunity, I had a great conversation with Minister Clark, the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, about a month ago, and he promised me that we would have a facilitator in place by March 1st. And the last time I checked, it wasn't February anymore. So I may have sent a message off a couple days saying he's on notice and we want to see where we're going. But ultimately, I have to focus on the things that I have some control over as a city and a regional councillor. The control that I have right now is on pushing for better shared services. And I'll give credit to the CAO at the City of St. Catharines, David Oakes, regional CAO Ron Tripp. I know that they're working through that process at the staff level. Chair Bradley and I have had some good conversations. The mayors talk about this regularly. And the facility up at Canada Summer Games Park is the example I lean on. It's a different way of doing things. We have a much better facility because of working together, and not just municipally. We went and we brought Brock into the fold, or Brock brought us into the fold, who knows. But we all brought something to the table along with the region, and we were able to get a facility that is second to none as far as I'm concerned. But that only happened because we ignored the boundaries. And there were debates, like at our city council, there was a lot of questioning. Well, listen, this facility won't actually be on St. Catharines land. Well, no, if I can stand on the property and spit on St. Catharines land, though, that's basically the same thing. And again, we get more and we don't have to spend as much. And that's the lesson we have to learn from it. So I am cautiously optimistic, which is a terrible political weasel set of words, but I'm cautiously optimistic that we're going to get through this process and we're going to be in a better place. I fear that we may wind up exactly where we were when we started, and that's not useful to anybody. We need to have some changes coming through, and we need the government to be collaborative in this, the provincial government to be collaborative with the people in Niagara to make sure that it's what works for our municipality.
I couldn't agree more. One of the things I wanted to mention, and it was never clear, in 2019 when the provincial government actually had started the review, ended the review, they made funds available to municipalities to saying, if you want to do a review, here's funding that's available to you. The region, the municipalities didn't really pick up on it. What has changed in the last 4 years that we're here today having this conversation, and what commitment can we give to the community to saying, we're committed to improving it. And I'm only saying this is because the last 3 years, or the years of the pandemic, every business, every organization that's here and that's present, everything has changed for them. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes we probably are in a place right now where we would like to see the same commitment.
Well, and I think you said, what's changed at the municipal level? The pandemic is exactly it. The pandemic laid bare a lot of cracks in the foundation that need to be dealt with. And we know when we look at our infrastructure, listen, the infrastructure problems that we have now are a direct result of not dealing with the infrastructure, not going through the preventative maintenance process. And I will say this, as a young city councilor, I sat through many GNCC presentations where Keith Yomwanzia would come and present and tell me about the GNCC being a member-driven organization. And then he would say, you can't keep pushing the maintenance bill down the road. And I think that the pandemic has laid some of that to bear. But it's also laid bare, we can't keep doing things the way we've been doing them. When I talk about looking at new municipal programs or facilities, the conversation now is not about, well, can the city afford to do this by itself? We're not talking about doing things by ourselves anymore. We need to be partnering with the private sector. We need to be partnering with other levels of government. We need to be partnering with other organizations to build, to run programming. We have to do all of those things because it's not reasonable to put the entire cost on the property tax base and expect residents and businesses and industry to bear that brunt. It can't be done that way. There's a capacity issue, and we've seen a lot of areas where the municipalities do have to spend, but where we can avoid spending and work in partnership with the private sector, I think we have to go down that path. Otherwise, you're going to wind up with situations where you're hollowing out your community because people can't afford to live there anymore.
Yep. And I could speak for the private sector actually being willing and open towards working with it too. But actually, and I think this is a good segue to look at the next topic. Many questions that have come forward related to infrastructure and housing. And I think maybe that's where even governance structure is closely linked to that. How do we deliver on this? In 2021, the Financial Accountability Office Ontario found that 48 of Hamilton Niagara's municipal infrastructures were not in a good state of repair, above the Ontario average, with a $7.9 billion infrastructure backlog. And we hear about it, read about it regularly. Can you tell me what proportion of those figures belong to St. Catharines, and can the backlog be closed?
So I'm going to sort of glance over at the table full of St. Catharines senior management. I want to say that our infrastructure deficit is in the 600 million range, a little bit above that, maybe closer to 700 million. Anthony? Am I close? I'm close. No, I want to say the number right now is about $690 million. I think that's the number. That number's been increasing over the years. And when I came in as budget chair, I guess it would have been 2015, I think that was the piece that was most apparent to me was we had an infrastructure deficit. And I will say at the time, that infrastructure deficit was significantly less. But it was significantly less because the costs in the building industry have really exploded over the years. And anybody who's in construction knows the cost of doing almost anything is a lot more now than it was in circa 2015. But it caught my attention because you immediately realize that that's a number that's too big for the property tax base to bear. We need help from other levels of government. And this is a statistic I like to give to people because I think it frames things pretty well. Of every dollar that's spent in taxes in Ontario, about 8 cents goes to the city and the region level of government. So municipal in total takes about 8 cents of every dollar. The rest of it goes to the federal government and the provincial government. So 8% of the taxation dollars go to the municipality. 50% of the infrastructure is owned, operated, maintained by the municipality. So there's a big problem there. Our funding doesn't match our responsibilities. And I don't think in Canada, at least not in Southern Ontario, not in St. Catharines, I don't think we're over-infrastructured. I don't think we have too much infrastructure. I think we built a system that doesn't fund infrastructure and doesn't prioritize infrastructure renewal properly. So it's left municipalities in a situation where to be able to fix the big things, you need help from other levels of government. And unfortunately, and I'm sure people have read this before, it's a lot easier for a federal or provincial government to get excited about a ribbon cutting at a brand new facility than it is to have them get really excited about the replacement of a trunk water main or the reconstruction of a street. And so there's no ribbon cuttings and there's no novelty checks and there's no special billboards that they can stand in front of and take pictures for the re-election brochure. But the reality is that that's where municipalities need the help. We're taking in 8 cents on the dollar of taxation revenue, but we have to deal with 50% of the infrastructure. And I'm sure this sounds to many in the room like a municipal politician crying about it, but it lays bare just a fundamental problem with the way we fund our infrastructure in Ontario. And I think that's something that's going to have to be addressed. And I've had the benefit of having a conversation with the minister, and he's been receptive to that. I think he understands it. He was a mayor in a previous political life before getting into the provincial government. I think he understands the difficulties. At this point, though, we need to start either restructuring the way the system operates or getting a bigger chunk of provincial taxation dollars flowing to the municipalities, because the infrastructure we have in the ground, we depend on. And if we're going to have to upkeep it, we can't put it all on the property tax base.
As a Greater Niagara Chamber of Commerce, we are members of the Ontario and the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, and I'm working very closely with Ontario chambers across the province, and many of the municipalities mirror exactly your concerns that you have expressed. Does it matter, do we come together on issues like this? Does all of Niagara, all municipalities, all 12 municipalities are facing the same as St. Catharines is facing to differing degrees? Do we come together on this one and advocate at a provincial level?
I think we do a good job. I mean, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario is the main lobbying organization. I will admit, I've spent a lot of time with the Ontario Big City Mayors over the first 4 months. It's become a very effective vehicle. Mayor Bonnie Crombie up in Mississauga is the chair, and she's managed to get herself in the newspaper on a regular basis. Not so much doing battle with the provincial government, but being very blunt. These are our concerns. When we talk about, I did the laundry list of the different pieces of legislation. Bill 23 is the one we all talk about. There's a very real concern at the municipal level about development charges. The truth is that if we're not collecting development charges from the new developments, then the infrastructure that goes into the ground has to be paid for by everybody else in the community. That has to go on the tax bill somewhere. You can't allow a new development to be built and to not have water and roads and the rest of it. So that has to be built, but it has to be paid for. To her credit, and to Cam Guthrie, who was the chair before her, they've done a very good job, I think, leading OBCM and the big city mayors and getting the provincial government to agree. Yes, somebody has to pay for this, and no, it's not right to put it on the property tax bill. So they've guaranteed us that they will make us whole. That's important. We need to be made whole in this, because otherwise we're passing on those costs of new development to residents and to businesses. Yep. And again, that's not sustainable. I will say, I have been a partisan in a past life. I didn't enjoy partisan politics. I'm glad to be at the municipal level. I prefer working with everybody. I won't take the partisan pot shots at either the provincial or the federal government. That's not the way the city is supposed to operate. We can't do that. I've tried to build a good working relationship. And again, there are parts of the legislation that's been brought out by the province I don't agree with. I'll try to work through the right channels, OBCM, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, to try and get changes. I think that's the appropriate way to do it. But at the end of the day, we have to be partners with both the province and the federal government. And I know that that's an opinion. I've had good conversations with some of my colleagues at the region. Many of them, including the chair, have said the same thing. We need to be partners at the table, because getting into political bun fights isn't going to move Niagara any farther down the road that we're trying to get. We have to be working with those levels.
We recognize in Niagara, we recognize in St. Catharines, we recognize it actually across the country that we have a housing crisis. It was part of your election platform, you spoke to it. It's part of the platform of the council that has been voted on, and you mentioned the housing pledge that you have made. A city, like a city of St. Catharines, you can grant permission to build houses, but what else can we do? Because it's one thing to grant permission to build these houses, and we have people in the audience probably here who are saying, permit processing time. Can we do other things to actually then ensure, other than granting the permission, that it actually happens? And I fully understand that the labor shortage and the crisis we have right now and some of the supply issues that we've had have hindered some of the processes. If we have that, if we want to see the commitment, we have a provincial government who wants to see it, we have a municipality who does. What else needs to happen to make it happen?
Well, I think you have a provincial government that's very clearly focused on this. From a municipality standpoint, we've signed our pledge. We've said that this is our goal, and we are going to continue to work And I have to shout out Tammy Kate and our Planning and Building Services Department again. They've made changes, they continue to make changes. We have more modernization that's coming, technological upgrades that I think are going to make the permitting process better. And a credit to our council for voting to add a bunch of positions in the planning department to make sure that we can meet the guidelines we need to and try and expedite these processes. We also have a development community that I know is very eager to get started, but something that has to be recognized, and I think is going to require help from the upper levels of government, the province and the federal government, is how these projects get financed. Because the reality is a lot of these projects, especially in a city like St. Catharines, everybody knows we have an urban boundary. The province has not changed that urban boundary, so we have one direction we can grow, and that's up. But as soon as you start to grow up, now you're talking about higher density developments. Those are more expensive developments. They're going to require different financing models. And we know that the financing piece is very difficult right now. Right? Thank goodness yesterday, interest rates didn't rise again. I think everybody in the room, even from just a personal standpoint of paying the mortgage, is thankful that the rates didn't rise again. But with supply chain issues and the cost of building materials going up, there needs to be more help, I think, at the provincial and the federal level, because they're the levels of government who can afford to do it, to try and make the financing of these higher density projects more viable. I'd like to make the joke because we've had this conversation. Originally, when the pledges came out, there was a lot of talk about municipalities need to guarantee that they need to guarantee they're going to get 15,000 houses built. I can't guarantee that. I don't swing a hammer. Nobody at City Hall builds houses. That's not our job. We do the process to get the developments approved, permitting and plans inspection and all the rest of it. We can make improvements in those areas. The development industry is the one that's going to build it, but if they can't get the financing because of all of the circumstances that exist right now in Canada and North America with respect to the building industry and the costs, then it's not going to happen. So that's where the province and the federal government need to step in. And I think there has to be programs put in place to help the development industry. You identified another issue, right? There's a skilled trade shortage, and I've been teaching kids who are going off to be construction workers and electricians and plumbers and HVAC. I've been doing that for 15 years, and it's only in the last couple of years where I think the provincial government has really wrapped their head around the fact that we have a very serious problem when it comes to skilled trades. Everybody is aging out of the system. If we're not educating people at the front end and getting them the experience with those older skilled tradesmen who've been in the system for a long time, if we're not getting them that experience, we have a real problem. And in the province of Ontario, in 10-year periods, we've never built 1.5 million homes. That's never happened. We've hit about half. But the last time we did that was in the 60s. It's been a very long time since we've managed to build more than 800,000 homes in this province. 50 years almost. So there's a lot of pieces that have to fall into place. My commitment has always been, from the city of St. Catharines' perspective, we will do everything in our power to move the process forward. I know my friends in the building industry are going to do everything in their power. We need the province and the federal government to find ways to make the financing piece easier, because I think that's the last big hurdle that needs to be gotten over. Because again, in St. Catharines, there is no space to build, single family homes in, Greenfield. That doesn't exist. We need to grow up, and that's the more difficult build. So we need help from those other levels of government to get that done.
I think you're touching on a lot of important things, because the skilled trade, you're absolutely right. We don't have the people in it. It's a huge issue. Supply has been a huge issue that I think is being addressed. But you also talked about density. And density also means that we are actually going to see neighborhoods change. Neighborhoods where no one looked down on our backyard. And so that's an issue that we have. And it's a difficult one, I think, especially for councillors to deal with, because it's in their backyard. Those are their voters who likely don't want to see the changes. And at the same time, so we have the existing housing crisis that we have, and we have the Ontario government forecasting that we're actually growing in population by about 22% in the next generation, in the next 25 years. So if we look at Niagara as a whole, and I'm sure I have a couple of people from the region correcting me on this one, but say we're at about 470,000, 480,000 right now, and we're probably in the next 25 to 30 years are expecting to be around 620. I don't know if I see any nods or not, but I think I'm in the ballpark of it. Significant growth means changes in neighborhood. And decisions that are being made at council, it's difficult. It's a very difficult situation. How do we deal with it?
Before we go too far, Joe Critelli, these chairs are fantastic. I just want to say that. This is one of the most comfortable seats I've been in my entire life. I don't even know if Joe's here, but if he is, well done.
You have a buyer, Joe.
I think we have to accept the density is coming, but I will push back a little bit. I don't think necessarily it means massive changes to established neighborhoods. And this is one of the things that I've talked a lot about. I talked about it on the campaign, and you want to make a resident of a low-density residential neighborhood really happy, tell them that you want to attack parking lots, because they are all about building all kinds of density on parking lots. But the reality is that we do have large surface parking lots, not just in St. Catharines, but across the province of Ontario, because we've been so car dominant and so car focused for the last 70 years. You have these massive parking lots, and I mean, they're car storage spaces for, 8, 10, 12 hours of the day, and then they sit empty. They're a really convenient way for water to run off into the system, picking up all kinds of nasty stuff along the way. We can incentivize building on top of these surface lots. It's not a model that's difficult to see. Smart Centers, for example, is already doing this all across the GTA. They're putting massive residential developments on top of surface parking lots. From a municipal standpoint, that's a much better use of land. They're maintaining the parking, right? They're building over top of it, maintaining the public parking, so you still have the public use during the day for the shopping center, whatever it's around. But then you have, a couple thousand residential units on top of it. Generally, those residential units then have close proximity to the amenities that they need. A lot of shopping developments tend to be transit hubs, so they have access to transit. It's a perfect location for purpose-built rental. We need to attract that kind of development here. If we can do that, if we can bring purpose-built rental to those areas, if we can bring condominium units to those areas and build out the missing middle on top of those surface lots, I think we get very close, if not all the way to our housing pledge. And we haven't disrupted a single established neighborhood. There are things that are going to happen in established neighborhoods. I'm a big believer, in accessory dwelling units. One of the parts of Bill 23 that I loved was opening up additional opportunities for accessible dwelling units on properties. I think that's a great move, and I think we have to be willing to push back against the person in the neighborhood who believes that that one additional rental unit in your basement is going to create traffic or parking chaos. That's never true, and it's always the argument that comes to council. But I don't think we necessarily need to have all of that development happening in the middle of established low-density residential neighborhoods. From my perspective, the best place for that high-density development is on transit routes. It's at major intersections. And again, Bill 23 and the changes that are being made by the provincial government are opening that up, and those are the positive changes that exist. So I think we need to embrace those. I think we have to sell those, and we have to find a way to incentivize those areas of development. And this is where the CIP becomes a great tool. And this is I will forever push back against people when they argue about the community improvement plan. It does what we wanted it to do. I hear every election, why can't government run more like business? And then you have this one program, and it actually makes money. You've got people in the community going, well, it's terrible. And I will just point out, the one round of applause I really got was when I told you the statistic about CIP and how it actually makes money, and we need to do more of that. That's the reality. That's how we're going to get these developments built in the places that we want them. We have to be willing to use the programs that we already have, but use them in different and novel ways. And again, it's happening around the greater Golden Horseshoe. We're starting to see those developments. We have to keep pushing. And I'm a big believer, I say this all the time. I don't need to come up with the idea. I don't pretend to have come up with most of my ideas. I will steal unmercifully from anybody. I'll give them all the credit in the world. I will tell you that this was, I'd say Dia Daddy's idea, but it's never Dia Daddy's idea. But I will give credit where credit is always due. Let's steal the ideas that work and let's put them in place. You get a lot more accomplished when nobody cares who's getting the credit. So let's just do that.
Very good. I think you have the support.
But never give Dia Daddy credit, ever, for anything.
We have a couple more questions, and I only have about 5 minutes, so if I could ask...
Rapid fire?
Yes, rapid fire
All right, let's
answers.
do the speed
Thank
dating
you very
round.
much. Okay. So I'm changing topics.
Okay.
State of emergency and over homelessness, mental health, opioid addiction. to draw attention to the problem. It was voted on at the Niagara region and has been declared. You spoke in your speech about the funding that is needed to make it happen and to address the issue. In an ideal world, what can we do? What do we need to do to make a difference?
I will say, my frustration with the state of emergency, not that we are trying to draw attention to it. I think that's a positive thing. I will say, I think most of us are aware that there's a homelessness problem, an opioid epidemic, and a mental health crisis going on in our community and across the province. What you can do is talk to your municipal representatives, but more importantly, your provincial representatives. And I mean this with all due respect. We know here in Niagara, we are underfunded, full stop. We are not getting the same amount of funding as other municipalities. Bad decisions that were made in the past. I don't care to delve into the history of it. I know that we're not getting what we need to combat these problems. So if you're speaking to your provincial representatives or you're speaking to members of the provincial government specifically, make sure they understand that your opinion is that needs to change. By the same token, I've been very honest about this, and I'll continue to be honest. Regional government needs to start putting dollars from the levy towards this problem if we're not getting it from the province. It's not good enough for us to point fingers at each other like some bad Spider-Man meme online and say, well, it's your fault. Well, it's your fault. Well, you're supposed to do it. No, you're supposed to fund it. It doesn't matter. Within the 500-meter radius of City Hall where I have my office, homelessness, opioids, and mental health are very widely apparent. And that happens to also be the downtown business district. And I'm not saying that it's important because it's the business district. I'm saying that it's very obvious to see, and it's having serious impacts, not just on the people who are experiencing these issues, which should be our first motivator, but also on the community surrounding them. We have to do right by the people who are in the depths of a mental health crisis or who haven't been able to find safe and secure accommodations for the last 8 months. We have to do right by those people, the people who are in the throes of drug addiction. But we also have to do right by the rest of the community. It's much bigger than just the people who are experiencing the problem. Again, prime motivator, but there's so many other knock-on issues that get better if we properly fund the program. So with the state of emergency, I said very clearly at council, this is a marker. If you vote in favor of the state of emergency, which is just words, then you have to be prepared to vote to spend levy dollars to fix the problem. You can't have it both ways. If this is just us blaming another level of government and moving on with our day, we're not doing right by the people who are in the midst of the crisis, but we're also not doing right by the community.
Very good. This is a very important issue. But now, you have transitioned towards being a politician, but now I'm going to ask the teacher in you to keep it to 30 seconds.
Okay.
On the next one. You pledged to allow people on fixed incomes to freeze their property taxes. However, during your term, there will be a reassessment of property values, which won't have been done for 8 years to this point. How are you going to assess taxes in light of the reassessment, and will you commit to keeping total taxes paid where they currently are? 30 seconds.
So,
yes.
just for clarity, the campaign commitment was for seniors on a fixed income.
Yep.
So seniors, because
yes.
I want to make that clear. We're still working out the details of that program. We know that there's an MPAC reassessment coming, and we know that it's going to have big implications. I don't think they're as big as it's been made out, but there still will be implications in St. Catharines. I can commit that our council is very aware of that. We made budgetary decisions this year to try and prepare for that possibility so that we can continue, we can maintain those campaign commitments that were made.
Perfect. We need to talk about the recent budget that was processed, and especially as we are, I think, as a community, all in support of regional transit and the change that's happening. I think it was long overdue, and we really thank you and your colleagues for all the work that has been done on it. By uploading transit to the Niagara region, St. Catharines had an opportunity to reduce taxes. We've seen some other municipalities across Niagara doing so. I know you didn't, but if you can explain your decision and what are the things that people of St. Catharines can expect in enhanced services by you not making that decision?
I think most municipalities that had the opportunity needed to use that upload room, and I'll explain, and I make no bones about it. We did a lot of things during the COVID pandemic to try and reduce the tax burden on people that were struggling to be able to keep their homes, keep their businesses open. We put in place a number of programs. We pulled from reserves. I said, the reserves are there for a rainy day and there was a monsoon, so we used them. But we needed to get the corporation back to a point of equilibrium. And we also identified, and we talked about this a little bit, we identified cracks during the COVID pandemic that needed to be dealt with. We were in a situation because of the rise of homelessness, because of the rise of the opioid epidemic, where it was no longer safe in some situations for our staff to be going into situations by themselves. We need additional staff to be able to do that. There were a lot of mitigating factors that came in. Part of it was the reserves, but part of it was also paying appropriately for the infrastructure. We had reduced the amount we were putting towards our infrastructure, but that infrastructure deficit keeps growing, and we have to try and keep up with it. So the decision was made by St. Catharines Council, along with almost all other councils. I can only think of one that actually made the decision not to do it, and that one also has higher taxation levels than the rest of us, so they had a little bit more room to work with. We needed to make those decisions, or else services were going to drop drastically in the city of St. Catharines. We could not have maintained doing what we were doing given the environment that we were in post-COVID. So the decision was made, and I'll stand by it. And I know that it was a difficult decision for my council. I know it was a difficult budget for our staff to put together. But at the end of the day, we need to be confident that the city is actually able to meet the service levels that people expect. And if we weren't going to be able to meet those service levels, we had to make changes to either change the level or raise taxes to be able to pay for the services that people expected.
Is there ever an opportunity, actually, when you look at the municipal budgeting process, to say, like, we need to actually give residents in business the opportunity to look at multi-years instead of 1 year at a time? It's hard on businesses. It's hard on individuals to saying it's up 5% here, it's down 2% there. Is there an opportunity? Because normally it's a big organization you're running, it's a big budget that's there, it's the same at the regional level.
And we're doing that this year. This year will be the first of moving into a multi-year budget. So we'll be passing a 3-year multi-year budget at this upcoming fall. And Councillor Carlos Garcia is the budget chair, and he's going to be sort of leading the charge with that. But we recognize that predictability is the important thing. That was the impetus for the seniors on a fixed income increment deferral program. We understand that people need predictability. We want to bring predictability, and so the budget going forward is going to provide that predictability to residents, to the business community, to everybody.
Thank you very much. Last summer, there was a spate of what the Niagara Regional Police called hate vandalism in the city, including the vandalism of Harriet Tubman's public school, not for the first time, the Caribbean Eatery, and a number of vehicles defaced with racist and homophobic slurs. We've heard from people of color in the city that these incidents are getting worse, and Statistics Canada supports their narrative, with the latest data showing that the number of reported hate crimes in the country has more than doubled since 2016. How would you want to see these addressed?
I think that there's a part for the Niagara Regional Police to play in this, obviously. I mean, these are crimes that are being committed, and the city will always be there to provide whatever assistance is necessary. One of the things I've taken it upon myself, and I will give credit to my predecessors, former Mayor Senzik, former Mayor McMullen, both made efforts to reach out to marginalized communities and make sure that they had a linkage to the mayor's office, were able to have conversations, were able to identify issues. I've tried to do the same thing. I had a very instructive meeting. I went to Friday prayers at the mosque about a month ago, and stayed afterwards, after Friday prayers were done, and had conversations with residents. And they were very honest with me about the barriers that they face in this community, the things that they see on a daily basis, which many of us would chalk up as just, nothing big, it's, don't let it bother you kind of thing. But when you are constantly faced with a barrage of aggressions, it wears on you and it's difficult. So I've tried to make it very clear. I know I have a meeting coming up at some point with the leadership of the mosque. We've reached out to other ethnocultural organizations, the different support organizations. I had a great conversation with the Sudanese community a couple weeks ago talking about the issues they're facing. We need to make sure that those people feel comfortable coming forward. We need to work with the NRP to continue to establish those links, because for a lot of people, some communities come to Canada and they've come from places where you can't trust the police. You can't have open relationships with people in authority positions. We need to demonstrate why Canada is different, why our community is different. We need to make sure the lines of communication are open. And from my personal standpoint, I have to be open to that. That's, I think, one of the most important jobs of a mayor is to make sure members of the community have someone they can talk to. It's the same for city councilors, someone they can talk to when they identify things that aren't right in the community. For the rest of us, I think it's incumbent on us. When you see it, call it out. It's uncomfortable the first time, but it gets easier every single time. And I know I've had to do it. Just that those unconscious comments that people make that maybe they don't even realize that it's borderline or it's a thing that shouldn't be said publicly. Call it out. And yeah, that's it.
I appreciate that. I really do. And I think so does everyone else in the room. I'm getting cues from my colleagues here to saying, wrap it up. I pretty much know they've been doing this for the last 5 minutes. So
this is code for Cisco talks too much. Hurry it along.
Yeah. I think, well, let me wrap up with one question then, one final question. 30 seconds, 20 seconds.
Yeah.
Well, something along those lines. And that is about the former GM plant and what will happen to the land in the future. I think it's of great interest to many people in this community, and so it should be.
Yeah. I would strongly encourage everybody who's interested, engagestc.ca. Right on the front page is the Ontario Street Secondary Plan. It encompasses the 282, 285 Ontario Street lot, as well as everything north to the QEW, south to Welland Avenue. And it's a reimagining of what that area is going to look like. I will say I have described myself since 2014 as cautiously optimistic. There's those weasel words again. But I've dropped the cautiously. The mortgage holder is actually getting work done on the site. And the joke I make to people is my office gets a lot of complaints. And for a long time, the complaints coming into the mayor's office was, it's an eyesore. Why isn't anything being done? I don't understand. Do something, do something, do something. And in the last 2 months, the complaints have almost done a 180. And it's like, there's too much noise. Why are they breaking up the concrete? And I see trucks and trucks of nonsense getting pulled off of that site every day. I'll tell you, I'll take those complaints 10 times out of 10. I'm optimistic that we're actually getting somewhere. The mortgage holder, I think, recognizes the best way to profit from this site is to get it cleaned up and get it developed. So I think the secondary plan couldn't have come at a better time. We are making progress. And I'm looking forward to working with the people who are there. I know city staff have been engaged on that property, very engaged, working as hard as possible to get something good done for the community. And I can't give enough credit to our planning and building service staff, our economic development staff. They've led the charge, and they keep coming to the table every single time they need to try and make sure that something good can come of that property, and they deserve a lot of respect. Mortgage holder as well. I'm, again, very optimistic in the future of that part of the city.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I think on behalf of everyone here and our members, my colleagues, our board, I really want to say thank you. Thank you for spending these last 2-3 hours with us. And when I look at the dialogue that we're having right now, it makes me kind of think we need to do it more often than once a year. It's kind of my feeling. There's a lot of questions. Some of the questions we haven't gotten to, they're specific. I think we as a region and as a municipality are likely undergoing significant changes that we haven't seen to the same degree in the upcoming month. And I think we need to keep the doors open and the dialogue going. And I think you have our commitment as a business community to do that. So thank you very much. And on that note, I am going to pass it over to Bell Community Affairs because we have Juan Cuales Espiona, a lawyer by training and a specialist in public administration with over 18 years of working experience in both public and private sectors. He has worked in government at the local and federal international levels in Latin America, Europe, and the US. He holds degrees from Sciences Po in Paris, London School of Economics, and Harvard Kennedy School of Government. And since 2021, he has been supporting the Bell Network Proposition Team Municipal Relations in Toronto and the GTA. And he's one of our partners for today's event. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Mr. Mayor, distinguished guests, Mishka, thank you very much for giving Bell the opportunity to be here today. And I have to say that I have sort of a prepared speech for today, but after listening to Mayor Cisco, I'm amazed by having a mayor with such commitment to public sector and helping others, and his comprehensive view about what public sector is and his understanding of healthy business and private sector working together with public sector makes a great community. And this commitment that in your case, go from school teacher to mayor, and your vision of accessibility, affordability, and accountability is the best definition ever for smart cities. And just thank everyone, and thank you, Mayor, again, and Mishka, for being here. And you have all our commitment to support St. Catharines, and thank you for letting us work together with the Chamber of Commerce. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, too. Thank you very much. And on that note, I would like to thank Virgin Insurance again for being our title sponsor. I would also like to thank M&P, Electra, Bell, McGar Realty, Heddle Shipyards, YourTV, Soundbox Productions, Critellis, Move 105.7, Newstock 610, CKTB for making today possible, and for all of you for being here with us during this important dialogue. And lastly, my thanks go to the amazing staff at Club Roma for making us feel so welcome. It was amazing, and I have a lot of my staff here. I don't have a lot of staff. I have all of my staff here. And so thank you for making today happen. Thanks.